Microsoft Excel is full of all sorts of tools. Some tools are more widely used, more common in practice, and some tools are a little lesser known. We're going to take a look at some of these lesser known, more advanced type tools that we can use within Microsoft Excel. The first one that we're going to take a look at here is called the Goal Seek. This falls into a category of what-if analysis. If you take a look at my screen here, I've got the example file open. I'm currently on the worksheet tab called Goal Seek. And if you look up at the Data tab, top of the screen, underneath the Data Tools section, you have What If Analysis. And if I give that button a click, you'll find a handful of features. Again, these are some of the lesser known features that are built inside of Excel, but very powerful, very robust tools. Like I mentioned, the first one that I want to discuss here is the Goal Seek. So first off, before I jump in there and start to demonstrate it, here's the setup. So on this Goal Seek worksheet, I've got a simple little table. It's got a mortgage amount, $220,000. It's got an interest rate of 8%, ouch, and a term in months for the next 300 months. What I'd like to know is what my current payment's going to be using those arguments, those variables. Now, we're going to figure this out using a function that's built into Excel called the payment function, or PMT. Then we're going to turn around and see how we can adjust that current payment to fit more of my budget. But rather than us getting in there and trying to monkey around with these numbers here, well, you know what, I can't afford that. Let's try dropping the 220 to 200,000. Let's lower the interest rate. See if I can get that towards my budget. Rather than us doing that manually, we'll get Excel to do this for us through the Goal Seek tool. Take a look. So first, I'm going to go over to D3, and I'm going to create a simple little calculation here that'll find out the current payment using these three arguments here. And this is called the payment function, or PMT. So I'm going to go up to my Formulas tab. I'm going to go into Financial, and I'll find PMT. There it is, payment function. Now the PMT function, it takes a handful of arguments from us. I'm only going to use three of them, the three required ones. The first one wants to know the rate, which is the 8%, this cell B3. Now an interest rate as far as a mortgage or a car payment and so on, it's an APR, or an annual percentage rate. So I'm going to divide that by 12. I'll say B3 divided by 12. The NPER is the number of payments. So I'm going to grab the term in months value, which is 300. And the PV is our present value, which is the 220,000. So I'll hit OK there. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And roughly $1,698, almost $1,700 is what I'm going to be paying monthly for a $220,000 home at an 8% interest rate for the next 300 months. Yeah, ouch. All right, now it's in red and it's in parentheses because it's a negative value. And I can quickly change that. Just, you don't have to do this, but if I go up to my formula here and just put a minus sign in front of that PMT, hit my enter key, this will convert it into a positive value. So roughly $1,698 for the next 300 months. All right, now I think, you know what? That's a great little function. Next time I go buy a house or a car or whatever, I'm going to take this with me. Hey, but Excel says I could pay this. Well, you know what? I can't afford that much. That's $1,600 a month. Wow. I want to get that down to like $1,100. What can I do to get that down to $1,100? Now I could, in the past, what I would do is I would manually adjust these numbers. Say, you know what, I can't afford 220,000, so I have to lower that down to 200,000. Let's see what we get. 1, 2, 3. All right, that's getting closer, but not quite there yet. Well, I don't want to go any lower than that, so maybe I can get a better interest rate. If I wait a little bit longer, work on my credit. What if I try getting a 4% interest rate? Let's try that. Ooh, look at that, right? But this is me manually going through the motions and adjusting this. I'm going to undo these actions. Now, again, me manually. I don't want to do that. I want Excel to figure this out for me. This is called the Goal Seek. So first step, I'm going to select cell D3. This is the cell that I want to change. I want to reach the goal of $1,100 a month. Okay? So with that cell selected, I'll go up to my Data tab. top of the screen. I'm going to go into that data tools section, find what if analysis, and I'm going to grab goal seek. All right, 3 little things. First thing it wants to know is, okay, well, what cell do you want to set, right? I want to change the cell of D3. I want to set it to something else. Well, I want to set it to 1100. That's what I can afford monthly, right? Now, it's going to allow us to change one of these 3 values that formula, the 1698, uses. So let's say I'm going to try changing the B2 cell or the mortgage amount to get me to the $1,100 at an 8% interest rate. I'll hit OK. And Excel is going to calculate, it's iterating through all these values until it hits my goal. And I can see for the next 300 months at an 8% interest rate, I can afford $142,521 worth of house. Right? Changing just a couple little things. I want to set this cell to 1100 by changing this cell here. And Excel does the rest. Now, if I hit OK, it'll keep it. If I hit cancel, it'll close it out and take me back to the default once again. Let's try this one more time. I'll grab that cell, D3, back up to data, what if analysis, and goal seek. Now this time, I'm going to set the cell to 1100, but I'm going to try changing the interest rate. You know what? I want that $220,000 house. I got my eye on this house, but I can't afford it, so I need a lower interest rate. I'll hit OK. Oop, look at that. I got to 1100, but knocked off 5%, right? So I got to work on my credit, right? Or sweet talk the bank or whatever. But I got to get that interest rate down from 8 to 3%. All right. Very slick tool. Rather than you manually going through and adjusting these numbers over and over again, trying to hit this goal, get Excel to do it for you. Try this out. Open up the example file, jump to the Goal Seek tab, and change that current payment from that $1,600 or roughly $1,700 down to $1,100 or some other number by modifying one of these values, the mortgage amount or the interest rate. Microsoft Excel's Goal Seek tool, super slick, very quick, really optimizes some numbers to reach your goal. But one of the downsides or potential setbacks of the Goal Seek is it only allows you to modify one value to be able to reach a goal. Remember this? This was the previous video we were taking a look at with the Goal Seek. I was able to hit a goal for current payment by adjusting one of these values. I couldn't adjust the mortgage rate and the interest rate, right? I could only adjust one of them. Well, Microsoft Excel has introduced a feature called the Solver. Now, the Solver tool is an additional add-in. You have to activate this tool before you can use it, but it's free. It comes with Microsoft Excel. You just have to turn the feature on. The idea of the Solver, very much like the Goal Seek, it will help you reach a target, a goal, but it will allow you to change multiple values and set up constraints. Take a look. Open in front of you, I've got the example file, and I'm on the Solver worksheet. Here I've got 2 simple little tables. I've got some plant output for different quarters, and I've got some shipping costs, okay, for the different products that these plants are outputting. Now, what I like to do is I want to optimize this number right here. I want to get it to be the lowest possible number for total shipping costs. But there's some constraints that we need to live with as we optimize this number. Lower the better. This little graphic down below is going to explain some of the constraints. 1, each plant, we got 3 plants, must produce at least 20 units. Okay, so each quarter they got to produce at least 20 to justify that plant remaining open. That's one constraint. Constraint number 2, each plant has a maximum capacity. So the plant 1 can output up to 92 units per quarter. Plant 2, 45, plant 3, 55. That's a constraint per plant. Okay? And this is per quarter. The plant production must equal the requirements of the warehouse. So you see down here that quarter 1, all 3 plants can have up to 180. Okay? No more than that, because they have short life span for these products that we're putting out. Okay? So we've got a few constraints here. We need these constraints to be followed, right? But at the same time, I want to minimize, I want to optimize our total cost for shipping. Okay? So using the goal seek, like we saw earlier, really wouldn't accomplish this because we can only change one thing. Okay? Now we're going to use the solver tool, add all these constraints, and have Excel calculate all these numbers for us while keeping the total cost of shipping down to a minimum. All right, take a look. So first step, we have to activate the solver tool. Remember, it comes with Excel. It's free. You just have to turn it on. All right, I'm going to go up to my File tab. I'm going to go down to Options, File, Options. Inside the Options window, I'm going to go to Add-ins. Inside the Add-ins window, down at the bottom, I can see that I'm managing Excel add-ins. I'm going to hit the Go button. This opens up yet another window where I'm going to make sure I have the solver add-in turned on. That's active. Great. Make sure you check that box. You hit OK. And now on your Data tab, far right of your Data tab, you'll see an Analysis section with the solver tool. So it's not on by default. You have to go turn that on first. All right. Once that's active, I'll give that solver button a click. This opens up my solver parameter window. First thing, our whole objective here in this scenario is I want to optimize. In my case, I'm thinking optimize. I want to minimize our total cost for shipping. So I'm going to say set objective is going to be H8. That's the cell that I want to work with, that we're ultimately going to optimize. And what I'd like to do is set that to a minimum. Not going to do a maximum, right? I don't want to spend more on shipping. I want to spend less on shipping. So I'm going to set that to try to be a minimum value. But remember, we have all these constraints. Okay? So first thing, how are we going to minimize that? How are we going to optimize that value? Well, we're going to allow Excel to change a few cells here. And we're going to allow them to change these quarterly values here from B5 to E7, this group of cells. Excel can jump in here and change these numbers and try to keep the total shipping cost to a minimum. But remember, we got a few constraints. So now I'm going to set up some constraints, and I'm just going to use these 3 constraints right here. So first one, I'll hit the Add button. And my first constraint says that each plant must produce at least 20 units a quarter. Okay? So I'm going to grab these cells down here, total units produced. These are the various quarters, right? And I'm going to say that they have to be greater than or equal to 20. That's the first constraint. I'll hit the Add button. That's constraint number 1. Each plant must produce at least 20 units a quarter. All right, what's the next one? Plant 1 has a maximum of 92 units per quarter. All right, well, I'm going to grab the plant 1 values, which are B5 through E5, and I'm going to say that this can be less than or equal to 92. That's a maximum value, right? Plant 1 each quarter can be less than or equal to 92. All right, I'll add that one. All right, let's do the same thing for plant 2. I'll grab plant 2's values there. And this one could be less than or equal to 45. I'll add that one. And then one more for plant 3. This one will be less than or equal to 55. And I'll hit add. So now we've got 4 constraints. The 20 or more and the maximum amount for each plant. All right, we've got one more. The plant production must equal the requirements of the warehouse. The warehouse demands 180 units per quarter 1, 80 for 2, 190 for 3, and 160 for 4. So now I'm going to do this by quarter. I'll grab quarter 1's total here, total units produced. And this one has to be equal to the 180. And I'll add that. And I'm just going to do this for each of them here. I'm grabbing quarters 2. This one has to be equal to the 80. Great, add that one. Now we're going to grab quarter 3. This one has to be equal to the 190. And one more. Quarter 4's has to be equal to the 160. And add that. All right, so now we've got all these constraints. I'll hit OK. This will take me back. Oh, let's. I already hit the add, so it's opened up a new constraint for me. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out. This will take me back to my solver parameters window. So I've got my set objective, H8. I'm going to go to a minimum of that value by allowing Excel to change the values of the plant production within these constraints. All right, here comes the magic. We've told Excel what we want to do. Minimize the total shipping by changing the plant output, but keep in mind these constraints. I'm going to hit OK or solve, and Excel does the rest. Take a look at this. All this work, we've minimized the shipping down to $848.01 by adjusting these numbers here, but staying in with these constraints. So if you follow through, they're all above 20 within there, right? Their plant 1 was 92, 45 for plant 2, and 3 was 55, and they all match their output here. This is the solver. All these constraints, Excel did all this work for us. Calculations is running in the background for us that output this final number of minimizing the total shipping cost within those constraints. Try it out. You can follow this little guide that I've added into this file here, or come up with your own constraints, or think about your own documents. I need to be able to get this number optimized to maximum amount, to a specific value, to a minimum amount, but keep these constraints in mind as well. We have to follow these rules. Try it out. Microsoft Excel is full of so many different powerful, robust tools. The GoalSeek and Excel Solver tool are just two of these. During this session, we're going to take a look at working with data tables. Data tables are a way for us to interject alternative values into a calculation without having to recreate the calculation. Excel, through the use of a data table, will essentially take these alternatives and stick them into the formula, recalculating it for us. Open in front of you, I've got the example that I'm going to be demonstrating here. This is a part of the exercise file that comes with this course. I'm currently on the data table tab. Now on here, I've got a simple little table with 3 values: a mortgage amount, an interest rate, and term in months. Now right below that simple little table, I've got a list of alternative percentage rates, the interest rates, 7 1/4, 7 1/2, 7 3/4, and so on. So what I'd like to do here is I want to know what my monthly payment is going to be based off of these 3 values, 220,000, 8%, and 300 payments. But I also want to know what that payment would be like if I varied up the percentage rate. Well, we can recreate the formula that figures out the monthly payment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different times, or we could use this little table that I have right here, this B to C column from B7 to C14, as a data table, and Excel will do it all for us. Take a look. Inside of Excel, there are 2 different types of data tables. There's a single variable data table, meaning you've got a single set of alternatives, or a multi-variable data table, where you can do 2 different sets of alternative values into a formula. The example that I have here is a single variable data table. Now with the single variable data table, it has to be set up in a very specific way. The very first column in the table has to be your list of alternative values. In our case, it's this percentage rate. The second column in the very first row is where your formula, your original formula, is going to be placed. And down below it is where Excel will recalculate all for you automatically based on these alternatives and that original formula. All right, so my first step, I've got the table set up. My second step, second column, first row, I'm going to put the formula here. And I'm just going to type this one in. Equals payment, PMT, and I got the rate, my C3 cell here. It's an annual rate, so I'll divide that by 12. I've got my number of payments, C4, and I've got my present value, 220,000. There we go. Now I am going to put a negative sign in front of that PMT just to turn this into a positive value. When you use the payment function, it takes the outcome of the formula and turns it negative. You're withdrawing this money to make this payment, but I'm going to make it positive here. All right, so roughly $1,700 monthly based on a $220,000 mortgage amount for an 8% interest rate for the next 300 months. All right, so now I've got my single variable data table set up. First column, alternatives, first, second column, first row, the formula, and down below, Excel is going to fill in the rest for me. Now, once that's set up, this is a very simple process. Here's the first step to actually convert this into a data table. First, I select the table from B7 down to C14. I'm then going to go to my data tab. I'm going to go over to the data tools section into what if analysis, and I'm going to go to data table. Now remember, I mentioned that there's two different types of data tables. A single variable where you got a single set of alternatives, and a multivariable where you can do two sets of alternative values. Ours is a single, and in my case, I'm going to use this column input cell. And what this essentially means is we're going to take this column of alternative rates and place it into this 8% area where our formula is looking. Our formula currently gets its percentage rate from cell C3. So for my column input cell, we'll take this column here and we're going to input it into the C3 cell. So for column input cells, make sure we got C3 there, and I'll hit OK, and that's it. I'm done. Excel has taken my simple little table, that list of alternatives and that formula, and through a little bit of input of my own, telling it, hey, we're going to take this set of columns, column values, and input it into that C3 cell. It calculates all the alternatives for us. Really simple. Anytime you've got a set of what if, hey, what if I put this value in there? What if I put this value in there? What if I put this one or this one or this one? We can build a simple table and list out these alternatives and have it, Excel, calculate all of those alternatives for us. Try this out. Open up the exercise file, hop over to the data table tab, and work out the list of alternatives here within a monthly payment. We're going to take a look at one more Excel what if analysis tool. And the one that I want to demonstrate here is called the Scenario Manager. Now I want to build up the idea, the concept here before we jump in and see how this thing actually works. Open in front of you, I've got the example file that comes with this course, Excel 103 Advanced Exercises, and I'm currently on the Scenarios tab. Now, what I've got here is two simple little tables. The first one is some projected growth for various quarters over these different regions. I've got north, east, west, south for the 4 quarters, and some totals here. Now, again, it's a simple little table. All that's happening here, the first quarter, these are just simple values. I'll click into one of those cells like C4 here, and I can see it's just a simple value up there in the formula bar. If I go to the East quarter 2, this one is a calculation. And it's a simple calculation. It's taking the previous quarter amount, multiplying it by C12, which is 2.3%, and then adding it back to the previous quarter. So we've just got a 2.3 predicted sales growth for quarter 2. And same with quarter 3. Same idea, just taking the previous quarter's amount, multiplying it by this predicted sales growth, and then adding it back in to get our next quarter's amount. So simple little table there. And this little predicted sales growth table down below are these different scenarios. You know, we're going to have a predicted sales growth of 3.3% for the north, just blanket across the board. Oh, for east, we're going to do 2.3 every quarter, and so on. Now, this tool that I want to demonstrate here, the Scenario Manager, once again falls into this category of what if analysis, is going to allow us to create and save multiple scenarios. For example, I want to have a best case scenario. Now, what happens in the best case? How far up do we go in this predicted sales growth? Maybe north becomes 5%, east becomes 8%, west becomes 6%, and so on. Well, I also want to have perhaps a worst case scenario. Well, do we go negative? Do we have 1% across the board? Do we have 0%? Right? What's the worst case here? And perhaps I want to have some other scenarios. Well, in order for me to do that right now, just as is within Excel, I'd sit here and adjust these numbers. Like if I change the 3.3% to, let's say 5%, I'll hit my enter key here. I've now updated that predicted sales growth for north, but now all of my north values have updated. They're all now being multiplied by a 5% predicted sales growth. Now I want to show off a worst case. Well, now I got to get back in there and adjust the value. Let's go down to 1% or whatever. So it's kind of just a game of me updating this single table here. Or maybe I'm going to undo this, Control Z. Let's get that back to the 3.3% there. So I could also perhaps create other worksheets, just duplicating this and changing the values there, and then having a worksheet for best case and a worksheet for worst case and a worksheet for different cases, different scenarios. Well, that would be one way for us to do it. But I want to show off this tool here. This scenario manager allows you to use one worksheet and then save off different scenarios that you can just toggle through. Take a look. This is how it works. So my first step, I'm going to select the values that are going to change, that I'm going to change through the different scenarios. Best case, worst case, and so on. So I'm going to select C11 to C14. I'm then going to go up to my Data tab. I'm going to go to What If Analysis, and I'm going to go into Scenario Manager. Now I currently have no scenarios in there, none defined. So I'm going to go ahead and add one. We'll call this, we'll call it default. I'm going to create one scenario here, default scenario. That's just going to be left as is. Just this 3.3, 2.3, 4.3, and 1.1% for the different regions. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit OK again, not changing anything, just boop, I've got a default scenario. All right, let's create another one here. So I'll go back to Add, and let's call this Best Case Scenario. And I'm going to be changing cells C11 to C14. I could put an additional comment here. This is best case, yada, yada, yada. Put some description in there about why this is best case and so on. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now I get to make my changes. And this 4 little values represent those 4 cells that I originally highlighted. So this is my best case, and I'm going to make up some numbers here. There's definitely more thought that goes into this process. Perhaps we're going to have a meeting where you sit down with other forecasters in the office and come up with these scenarios. And, you know, what if we cut forces here? What happens to this production plant? What if we increase our production output here? What happens to our forecast and so on? So there's a lot more thought that goes into this, but the tool itself is just a way for us to store off and save these various scenarios. So I'm going to make up some numbers here. We'll say north goes to 5, east goes to 8, west will go to 6.5, and south will go to 3. So I'll hit OK, and I've now got my best case. Now let's create one more just for fun. Let's call this one worst case. I guess worst case would be, you know, we're shutting down. Oops, let's make sure we spell this right. We're shutting down. Everybody's going home, but let's make something up here. Let's put them all down to 1. We'll make it really simple just for the demonstration. All right, so now I've got my 3 scenarios here. And notice in the background, I've still got my original set of values there. Well, what I can do now with my scenario window open, Scenario Manager, remember I got this from Data, What If Analysis, and Scenario Manager. I can now select one, like my best case, and I'll go show it. And so now I've updated my numbers here, which are reflected in the calculations. I'll go to worst case, and I'll show it. So now they're all 1%, and my calculations have updated. And I've got my default in there. So a very quick, very robust tool where we can save off these values and treat them as different scenarios and just toggling between them. No longer am I creating multiple worksheets to be able to show off these different scenarios, okay, or just manually overwriting stuff to change the values, but I've just got them all saved right here that I can just toggle between. Try it out. Open up the exercise file, hop over to the scenarios tab, and build some of your own scenarios. Worst case, best case, whatever you want to call them. Create some numbers here, save them off as a scenario, and confirm that they work.